What are your real-life ghost stories you like to tell on dark and stormy nights? Please do like, comment and subscribe for more juicy content. I know it sounds like something straight out of a movie, but it's 100% what happened to me about 24 years ago. When I was still relatively newly married, my then husband and I moved into a townhouse-style apartment. The 2 floors of our apartment were on the second and third floors of the building, and the management office and mailbox area was almost directly below us on the ground level. Important for later, the woman who managed the building was older, didn't care for the property well, and usually spent most days chain-smoking Camel non-filters in her office. And being a hateful old racist. Imagine renting a place from Juno the social worker from Beetlejuice, but less helpful. She really resented what we had the townhouse, claiming we lied about my being pregnant when we moved it, because she didn't want to rent the unit to people with kids. She also made a few disparaging remarks about my husband, due to his race. She was a real peach, truly. So after kiddo was born, I was a som, just busy keeping the house clean and the baby occupied without a car, or local mom friends. After lunch, the kiddo needed a bath. Anyone who's fed a 9-month-old baby food knows the mess that can happen, so I went upstairs and ran the tub. Soon, I had the baby sitting happily splashing in one of those suction cup bath seats. Important to note, it's the middle of winter and we had no heat, an issue I'd been fighting Juno the landlord about for a while, among other maintenance issues, like my arcing ceiling fan, or the garbage disposal that was held on with duct tape and leaked. We basically had to keep a space heater, or 2, in every room to keep the chill off. I had taken one of the space heaters in the bathroom to keep the bathroom warm enough for bath time, and had it sitting out of reach, and splashing distance, on top of the bathroom counter. I was standing in the bathtub, getting ready to lift the baby out, when all of a sudden, the space heater started to rock back and forth, when it had not been rocking before. I had this horrible feeling of dread as I looked at the heater and I just reacted because I knew I couldn't get both of us out of the tub in time. I reached down to grab the baby seat, ending up pulling it up off the tub and dropping the baby over the side of the tub to the bathroom floor just as the heater got to the end of the cord. It thumped into the shower door, bounced off the edge of the tub and landed on its side on the floor a couple inches away, where it shut off. Had auto shut off in case it got tipped over. When I looked over to the corner of the bathroom, that part of the room seemed to just get darker, like it was filling up with shadows. There was no smoke, no change in lighting, no windows, so no sun going behind a cloud, etc. It was just darker. I also started to smell cigarette smoke. Camel non-filters, which I knew the smell of well from being in Juno's office all the time to get things fixed. The smell was so thick it made me cough and my chest ached, but I couldn't see any smoke haze. And I felt this overwhelming sensation of hatred and malice, like someone was standing there giving me a death glare. I grabbed the baby and a towel and ran downstairs. I was so freaked out, I couldn't bring myself to go back up there. So I used some diapers from the diaper bag and kept the baby wrapped in the towel and cuddled up to stay warm. I stayed down there the entire rest of the day until my husband got home. Every so often, I'd look up the stairs at the bathroom, but I didn't want to take the baby up there, and I was afraid to leave him alone downstairs. When he asked me why the baby wasn't dressed, I told him about the heater and the smoke in the bathroom, and he went up to check, figuring it was yet another maintenance issue. There was no electrical issues, no damage to the outlet. No smoke, no cigarette smell. He put the heater back on the counter and turned it on, watched it for a few minutes and it didn't rock, so it didn't rock itself off the counter earlier. He left it off, but later that day, we heard Juno's adult son downstairs near the mailboxes yelling his head off at people. And that's when we found out she'd had a massive heart attack in her office earlier that day and he'd found her dead in her chair, with a Camel non-filtered still in her hand. Something invited itself into my friend's home. I've told this story on another subreddit, but this is the one haunting experience that really freaked me out. When I was younger I had a next-door neighbor named Lexi and she was my best friend. Our parents would go on trips on motorcycles with each other and we would camp out at one of our houses until they came back. It was normal for us, we never had any paranormal events prior to this specific night. We were sitting in bedroom talking and doing what we normally did. We saw a bright light through her window followed with the sound of motorcycles pulling onto the gravel driveway. We instantly think okay our parents forgot something but before we could even get up to leave the bedroom, we heard a knock and a soft woman's voice say hello? The front door opened. This was a familiar sound because the door scraped against the hardwood flooring. We panicked thinking there was an intruder at this point because this woman didn't sound like our family, we have very Texan voices. We scouted the house, scared out of our minds, just to find the front door wide open and nobody in the driveway. Nobody was in the house. We finally felt better. We walked back into her bedroom, but before she went to enter, she collapsed onto the floor and started sobbing. I didn't know what was happening, I was scared, and she told me something as tall as the door frame was standing in her parents' room. After our parents returned, her family continued to have paranormal activity in their house. They moved out too. I manage a venue that used to be a Roman Catholic church, and was then abandoned and used as a flophouse for many years. I am frequently in the building alone late at night by myself, closing up after shows and club nights. Several strange things have happened to me there. I was really busy setting up for an event, and I was walking along the mezzanine area toward a room that everyone had told me was haunted, and while I love ghost stories, I don't really believe in the supernatural on a fundamental level. The last thing on my mind at this time was spooky stuff. I was en route from one area to another, on a mission to do some logistical task or another. I paused at the railing, and suddenly I felt the sensation of being grabbed hard around the ankle, as though from below, which made no sense as it was a 25-foot drop down to the main floor. I leapt backwards and started shaking my leg, and looked everywhere, but saw nothing. I was taking a meeting in broad daylight with a collaborator. We were sitting on a plush couch in the middle of the space, enjoying our conversation about a potential series of events we could do. Because it was a business meeting, I left one cushion of space between him and myself on the couch. Suddenly, mid-sentence, I felt the distinct sensation of someone walking up to us, and then sitting directly between us. We both paused and just stared at the cushion, which was moving. There was an impression as though someone had sat down, and there was a palpable energy and tension in the air. It felt for all the world as though an invisible person was sitting right there. We sat frozen in silence for about 30 seconds, which is actually a long time, in the middle of a business meeting, staring at the cushion, until I finally waved my arms through the space in exasperation and laughed. We were both confused and shaken and ended the meeting quickly. I had to supervise a group who was rehearsing in the space. I was hungover and got in the morning, led in the group, and went upstairs into a secluded area to take a nap on the couch and wait out my shift. Mid-nap, I woke up suddenly and heard someone slowly descending the stairs from the bell tower. I froze, and kept my eyes closed, thinking it was someone from the rehearsing group and I just wanted them to go away. The footsteps drew closer, and I heard what sounded like a man muttering to himself under his breath, as he leaned over me, and grasped my hip hard. He squeezed it until it hurt. I let out a yell and opened my eyes, but there was nobody there. Probs just sleep paralysis, but very odd. I've never had a sleep paralysis incident before. Multiple instances of seeing figures in the mirror, hearing doors slam, etc. People calling my name from distance corners, when I'm there by myself. The custodian once told me she refuses to clean at night anymore since she heard someone quietly praying in the confessional at 3 in the morning. Everyone likes to claim it's the ghosts of all these Irish Catholic priests and their parishioners, but in my opinion the many years the church sat empty and desolate as a last resort shelter for drug addicts and prostitutes is the more likely window of time where people would have died desperate, lost and in pain. I've had a few supernatural experiences, but the one I usually go to is when I worked in a supermarket. I grew up in a farm town, and the only place to get groceries besides the grossly overpriced Shopko on the edge of town was the family-owned supermarket, Robertson's. The Robertson family was very active in the community, but also had a reputation from miserly to straight-up evil, depending on who you asked. If you asked me and the rest of the bag boys, Robertson's had a dark aura around it. Many features contributed, like the vaulted ceilings in the back rooms, the creaking floors in the upstairs offices, and the door hidden behind a pile of old shelves that seemed to lead under the loading dock. The worst was the patriarch of the Robertsons, Blaine. He was too old to handle the business decisions, but he was too stubborn to let his toupee-toting son take it out of his hands, so he spent his days shuffling around the floor, antagonizing the bag boys at every turn. He'd chastise us for clocking in more than 1 minute early. He'd chastise us for standing at the clock with a minute left in our shift. He'd chastise us for our laziness the second we weren't actively moving items. I always joked that Blaine was a vampire. He just refuses to die. Why else is there never a call over the intercom for kids who lost their parents? One night, my suspicions were reinforced. Blaine had showed up about 9 to take care of some office work upstairs. With all of our closing duties done, my partner for the night and I lollygagged in the stock room, right at the foot of the office stairs. When 10 rolled around and it was time to close, I figured I'd let Blaine know we were locking up. I started up the stairs and suddenly noticed it was dark. I got to the top and looked around. Not a single light in the offices was on. We had stood at the bottom of the stairs the whole time and Blaine hadn't passed us. Even when Blaine isn't looming like Nosferatu, strange things happen upstairs. The exposed water pipes leading upstairs twang like someone hit them with a hammer. Footsteps on the creaky floor echo through the whole back room. All of this happens when the offices are pitch black, as we stand next to the stairs. One night, my partner and I got freaked out by the noises from the offices and decided to spend the remainder of the shift lapping the store. But as we walked perpendicular to the aisles, a can of green beans halfway down the vegetable aisle suddenly fell off the shelf. We put it back in place and started walking again. 2 aisles down, another can fell off. This time, as I put it back in place, a can 15 feet down the aisle flew off the shelf. We left that one sitting and huddled around the cash registers for the rest of the shift. To top it off, though, a bag boy requested to be taken off night shifts after an experience he had in the break room. The break room has 2 small bathrooms, male and female. He was taking his dinner break when he heard a baby crying from the women's bathroom. He had been in there 5 minutes already and hadn't seen anyone come in, much less with a baby. He endured the crying for 5 more minutes before he got concerned and knocked on the door. Repeated knocks and questions got nothing back except for the non-stop bullying. He was finally convinced something had happened to the mother and cracked the door open. The room was dark and empty,